Okay, good evening again. Our guest this evening is Richard Reddie, who's, well, he'll tell you more about himself. He's the author of a couple of books, and we met a couple of years ago in London. And you were involved in a project called Set All Free.
Yes, I
if I remember correctly.
At that time, yes.
Yeah, so maybe we could start, maybe you could just tell everybody a little bit about Set All Free.
The Set All Free project was looking to mark the bicentenary of the abolition of the Slave Trade Act. It was very much a sort of church-related project that was going to look at the church's role in slavery, both positive and negative. I had the responsibility of, I was the project director, so I ran the project for about 3 years. I did a lot of work with his sister.
Yeah, that's right.
Who was a wonderful person, and she offered me a whole lot of good support. I think one of the key things I did was to organise a service at Westminster Abbey. And if those of you who've got long memories would remember that a brother came and demonstrated during the service. It was quite a powerful demonstration. Did that for about 3 years. During the course of that, I wrote this book here, my first book, Abolition, which sort of looks at slavery and freedom, but looks in particular at the role religion played in both enslavement and also freedom. But it also looked at it from an African perspective. So it looked at the work Africans did in freeing themselves. Generally speaking, books on the Atlantic slave trade tend to look at the emancipators or the abolitionists as being sort of Europeans, people like William Wilberforce, Thomas Clarkson. I was saying that it was the Africans who were the first emancipators. They started freeing themselves long before the whole question of whether Africans could be free was even debated.
Okay. And so you said working for the church.
Yeah.
You're a Christian yourself.
Yeah.
And of course your latest book, Black Muslims in Britain.
Yes.
Now, how did that come about, that you're writing a book about black Muslims in Britain?
You know, you get me started, when I start talking, my trouble is I don't stop. I started thinking about this book maybe about 20 years ago. When I was growing up, I had 3 heroes. The first was Muhammad Ali, formerly Cassius Clay, became Muhammad Ali in my house. Ali was like a god, sort of, you know. We used to watch his fights. I may look kind of young, but I'm not that young. I remember watching Ali's fights. I remember Ali had a fight against a guy from Bradford called Richard Dunn, and we all sort of wanted Ali to mash him up. Ali was like something special, you know. When Ali used to win a fight, we used to go to school next day and everybody was Ali in the schoolyard. So Ali was a hero. The other hero of mine was obviously Malcolm X. He was another hero. And then the third hero, some of you may know him, he was a Jamaican singer called Prince Buster. And what the 3 of them had in common was that they were all converts, came from Christian backgrounds, became Muslims. And I remember as a young man, because I'm from Bradford, I was born and brought up in Bradford.
Oh, that's a Leeds.
Huh? Leeds, listen man, that's a sin. Don't confuse Bradford with Leeds. From Bradford. I remember a lot of the Muslim guys, the young Muslims, were sort of Pakistani heritage, and they used to sort of big up the chest, because I had one friend who was called Muhammad Ali, and you know, when Ali was like the heavyweight champion, this guy used to say, "I'm Muhammad Ali," you know. Nobody used to mess with him. We kind of silly like that, you know, but he kind of, that whole name just used to inspire people, Muhammad Ali. And it was the case that, especially in the late 60s and the early 70s, the 2 foremost Muslims on the world stage were people of African heritage, but also people who were sort of converts to the faith, or reverts to the faith, unquestionably so. So in my house, you know, these 3 figures were very important. And the figure Prince Buster was very important because my parents used to always listen to his music. So on a Sunday, I used to come home from church and put on his music and used to listen to it. And I'd say, yeah. So I really sort of got interested in this guy's music. And I remember seeing a photograph of him going to America, and he had this big cross around his neck. And then a little later, I heard he became a Muslim. We had these records at home, Prince of Peace, and we used to see his own record label, and it was called Islam Records. And I remember thinking, well, hold on a minute, this man was one time a Christian and then he became a Muslim. What's going on here? Obviously he was part of a whole nation of Islam, you know, that sort of thing, that particular movement, as was Muhammad Ali. But the fact was, you know, they had moved away from their Christian background and reverted to Islam. And it kind of made me think, why did they do this? What was this all about? And what really kind of told me to write this book was when I was promoting this book, the publishers were quite good. They actually sent me on a book tour, so I used to go right around the country. And everywhere I went, at events like this, sometimes they were quite big, I would come across brothers who would revert to Islam, knowledgeable guys who, when we were talking about slavery, were very informed. And we'd have these heavy, real sort of engaging discussions about, the role of religion, and especially Christianity. And these guys knew a whole heap about Christianity, and we had this debate about, the Islamic role of Muslim, or the role of the Arabs welcome brother, in the slave trade as opposed to Christians. And we would have these kind of heavy debates which were amazing, because I used to love discussing this subject matter. But what I found really interesting was when I went to Bradford and when I went to Leeds, when I went to Birmingham, I came across old school friends. And on a couple of occasions I ran into a couple of individuals who, when I was at school, they were these kind of guys who were bullies, they used to beat you. So you'd be friends with them, because if you weren't friends with them, they'd take your pocket money from you. Anyway, one of these guys, I was chatting to him and he said, "You don't remember me?" I said, "What do you mean?" He told me his name, the Muslim name. He said, but you probably know me better as Wendell. And I said, I couldn't believe it. And he said, yeah. And he said, he became a Muslim, he married, got his own business. I said, well, hold on a minute. This is the same kind of guy who, I don't want to stereotype, but he's the kind of guy, if somebody said, what do you think Wendell's doing now? I'd say, well, probably in prison, something like that. But Wendell had turned his life around, and he was saying it was Islam that had done this. And as you probably know, there's a whole generation of people who were born and brought up in the church who just left en masse, reverted to Islam. And then the church started getting all excited. Why is this happening? Even in my own family, both on my mother's side and my father's side, people have left, have become Muslims from Christian backgrounds. They've left, and to me, I was just interested in knowing why this was happening. And in all truth, very little of any sort of substance has been written about this. Very little substantive sort of documentation or research is available. But you get some stuff. I mean, it's interesting that you've got lots of material on white folks who have reverted to Islam. There's no shortage of that, no shortage of academic work, no shortage of books. But with regard to the black community, very little, very little, even though, as I point out in the book, you had a guy in the 1960s called Michael de Freitas, who some sort of questioned whether he was sincere in his beliefs, but he was a very prominent activist. He was a guy who more or less kick-started the whole sort of race relations sort of industry in this country. So there's no real reason why we shouldn't have, that history shouldn't have been documented, but there's very little. So I wanted to know why people were reverting. I wanted to try and pick up, find statistics. There was nothing, so I just said, well, let me write something. I suppose the results of this book.
Okay, so as a Christian then, is it more of that we need to stem the tide, and you need to know what's going on to stem the tide, or is it just historical research?
It's just historical research. The church was upset with me because they wanted me to write something which would be, how can we stop this from happening? No, I'm not interested in that. That's not my, I didn't go, I think I say in the book, I didn't approach it from that. I sort of approached it from an academic perspective, just to find out why it was happening. So people then say, you know, I get invitations from churches to come and talk to us. Our young people are leaving. What can we tell them? I say, I can't tell you nothing. You know, really can't tell you anything. You know, if you're Christian, get praying. But for me, it's just looking at it from a sort of an academic perspective, trying to be as dispassionate as possible in writing it. And you know, it is a challenge, you know, just to try and, I don't know how many of you have read it, but I think I've tried to be faithful. Nobody's stoned me yet saying you misrepresented our faith.
That's why we called you here.
Let me run now. But, you know, it's just trying to sort of find out more really, and I think as I alluded to you, it's by no means the definitive account of what is happening. And I think I say it clearly here that what should happen now is that, you know, brothers like yourself should start telling your own story. You know, it should be the catalyst for more investigation, more research, more writing, so you can look at certain things and say, yeah, Brother Reddie was right with that, and then look at other things and say, no, Brother Reddie was wrong about that.
So what was the most surprising thing you found out in both in this book and the other book? What's the most surprising thing you've come across that, you know, really shook you or really changed your attitude, or was really just different to what you...
Well, I tell you what, to me it was with this book it was finding out, I suppose not so much for numbers, but the kind of initiatives that Muslims were doing to actually help the black community. And that's not just in London or even in Birmingham, but all over. You know, the kinds of educational things, health things, housing things, sort of social action. And the thing is, the church always goes on about, you know, it's got the kind of, you know, it's doing so much. And to an extent, it's doing quite a bit. But the fact is, Muslims themselves are doing a lot. And a lot of it goes unacknowledged. Tell you a classic example. Government, for instance, a couple of years ago had something called the Reach Project, which was a sort of a kind of a mentoring initiative. The idea was that, you know, you would choose primarily men, black men, who they could be good role models for you know, the kind of impressionable young people. Most of them were from the church. You know, to me, I said, but you know, why were there no Muslims in there? You know, bearing in mind some of the good, what I call remedial work that is taking place within the black community that comes from mosques or masjids, and they just weren't included, just weren't considered. And I said, but this is a major mistake. You know, you're sort of cutting off your nose to spite your face. Why aren't they included?
And it was a very big initiative, I remember.
Yeah, massive. The through whole money big.
What was the answer then? Why weren't they invited? Why weren't they?
Well, old-fashioned prejudice and ignorance and the lack of, if you ask me, just doing the field work. What they tend to do for these initiatives are go to the usual suspects. Yeah. So people who they know who are doing things, sometimes they're not even delivering, but they know a such and such a person, and they'll go to so he's high profile, and then they get him on board, get a ticker box, and leave it there. But the actual individuals who can make a difference and are making a difference, sometimes they're not even included. So I mentioned that in the book, I said, you know, this was a clear oversight on their part.
So I suppose we'll come back to that, but we'll come back. There's some other things that we'll come out specifically at the end. We'll put you on the spot.
Good.
It's October, it's Black History Month. What are your views on Black History Month in general? And then we'll kind of get into what you've been up to.
Well, it's one of those questions, isn't it? Because I mean, when was it now? It was about 4 days, no, on the 2 days ago. It's the 29th today, isn't it? Yeah. 29th, yeah. One day seems to blend into another. There was a big sort of conference stroke debate in London at the museum in the Docklands Museum, discussing Black History Month and whether we really do need a Black History Month, or you know, whether Black History Month is you know, it's redundant, or whether it's something we should be doing Black history 24/7. I've got a friend who has a Black History Month magazine. I don't know if you know Mia Morris.
Okay.
Yeah, and she has a Black History Month magazine, and she calls it Black History Month 365. So as far as she's concerned, it's Black History Month every day. And the idea is you both mainstream it. So in January there's something about Black History Month, but October is almost a sort of, I wouldn't say to use the term crescendo, but you kind of use it to hang a lot of history on it. I'm more minded to go with that. I think there is still a role for Black History Month. I think there's a lot of history that we're not aware of, and we continually make history. I think I mentioned in here that, for instance, when one looks at the Black Muslim presence or the Muslim presence in Britain, very little is written about it. So that could be something we focus on in Black History Month. I don't think we're redundant, or we've gone to a situation where we don't need to study our own history. I think we really do. But a lot of Black history, truth is salam, brother, is very much British history. Very much British history, so it's history for all of us. So although obviously the focus might be upon certain Black folks, it's very much British history. I mean, what this is here is about Britain. You got Black and you have Muslim and you have Britain, so it's very much about British history.
Okay. So you see a continuing role for Black History Month?
I mean, I know it's controversial. Not everybody feels comfortable with it. I know some people think the model is all wrong and we need to discard it. I like the idea of our history being celebrated throughout the year. And as long as that happens, and then, as I said, October is almost a crescendo, well, that's fine. As long as it's not a case of, we cram our Black history into October and then nothing. That to me is it's almost, I'm not even going to use the term ghettoized, but it's reductive. It's something that sort of restricts us, and it restricts our history, and it just says that we're only allowed a space in October to talk about important things when this is a 365 thing.
Okay, so in saying that, but what have you actually been up to then this Black History Month, this October? Anything particular that's you've been asked to do, or
I was asked to speak about my book on a couple of occasions, just to sort of talk about. I mean, I'm sort of. Where is the wrong term, but sometimes reluctant to talk about slavery, because for far too long, when we used to, back in the day, because I'm old enough to remember what things were like back in the day, Black History Month was all about slavery, and if it wasn't about slavery, it was about Martin Luther King. When we used to talk about slavery, we used to talk about William Wilberforce and what he did to free Black folks, and that to me wasn't Black history at all. So, in a way, as long as, if I go and talk about this book, what I try and do is to sort of look at the history of Black folks, Black and Asian folks as well, in Britain, and then sort of hang or peg some of this to it. So I would say, for instance, the transatlantic slave trade thoroughly ensured that Britain was a very diverse place, a very multicultural place, long before people started talking about Windrush in 1948 and the people arriving on, that infamous ship. And you read books by Pete Fryer or James Walvin about how in the second half of the 18th century you had at least up to 20,000 Black people living in London. Some of them were free individuals, some of them were runaway enslaved Africans. They were living their lives. This is sort of proper documented history. Who were they? What were they doing in Britain? What happened to them? to an extent that, you know, by the time people started coming en masse, or Britain became a multi-ethnic society as a result of Windrush, people were saying, oh well, we'd never seen these black folks before. So it's sort of looking at the slave trade within that context, rather than just talking about black people being herded onto slave ships, suffering and dying, because there's more to our history than that. You know, okay, we did suffer, we were severed, but at the same time we survived, and we're succeeding. You know, and that's the history. We are succeeding and making a difference to Britain, making Britain a richer place, culturally richer, religiously richer as well. So I've done that on a couple of occasions. I spoke about my book on another occasion as part of a discussion about young people. I think that was about 3 weeks ago. I try not to sort of, you know, just cram everything in a Black History Month and then, you know, I just go into hibernation afterwards. You know, it's important to ensure that, you know, what you do, you spread it out throughout the year. But I've been reasonably busy this month.
Okay. So you mentioned talking about young people.
Yeah.
And you started talking about the sort of the legacy, if you like. So, what do you see the state of play at the moment then, in terms of that, this word multiculturalism is always about talking about. There's the whole thing of just the state of play, the state of the youth, the state of play in Britain today. I mean, what's going on from your point of view? What's happening and what needs to happen?
I mean, in terms of our young people, obviously it's very, very challenging. I live in London, and every week you hear about what I would call lateral violence. Young people basically, sometimes, well, sadly killing other young people. You know, you had a case in Enfield a couple of days ago, and then before that you had another case of a guy, I think a young guy from the Congo. You know, worst of, you know, escapes violence in the Congo, arrives in London, and then ends up being, I think he was shot actually. That's not the full story of our young people, because I would say at least 99.9% of our young people are decent, law-abiding, successful, doing good things, not only in terms of school but also society, putting good things back into society. Often we don't hear about that. We tend to hear about the ones who are not doing so well for a number of reasons. They tend to get the media, which sort of leads to the false impression that all our young people are, and I hate this term, feral. You know, our young people are wild, mad, bad, and dangerous to know, and they need to be, you know, stopped and searched and you know, basically contained or controlled. That's not the case. But, you know, to deny the fact that we have problems within our communities, particularly, I don't know about out here, because it seems very peaceful out here and quiet and law-abiding and lovely.
Yeah, no criminals.
But in parts of London, you know, we do have this whole postcode stuff and gang stuff, and you know, I remember I've been in London for 20 odd years, and when I first came, it wasn't there. And then when it started to develop, it was a bit of a joke. You know, you'd be walking in an area and a guy would look at you and you'd just laugh and say, well, what do you think? Are you thinking America or something? You said, nonsense, forget about it. And now it's a situation where it really is a life or death situation for our young people. I think the good thing is that people are doing stuff about it. You know, whether community groups or faith groups are doing something about it, are making a difference. The trouble is they don't get the support. Often they don't get the support. So you see some good remedial work, and then maybe the council or local government support it, you know, by give them some money for a year or 3 years. The money runs out, and that's it. You know, and they say, but hold on a minute, you want to make a difference. You know, here we are, or you say communities need to make a difference. Here we are making a difference, and we're not being supported. And you kind of think where we are now with this whole big society debate, and what's his name, Mr. Cameron, talking about how he wants community groups and voluntary groups and charities to make a difference. Yet the same charities who are doing the work are probably going to end up with their funding cut. So, you know, I don't know what kind of big society he's thinking about. It's ill-conceived if you ask me. But there are groups out there doing some great work. I think in London, the fascinating thing is, a lot of it is coming from the church, but that's because of the size of the church. But you know, Muslims are doing good work as well. My kind of gripe is that they don't talk to one another. Not really. Not proper conversation in terms of how, you know, we can work together to help our young people, to inspire them to
You think if the Muslims talking to Christians or
Muslims talking to Christians? Not really. I don't think so. It's weird because, I mean, you know, if you look within a sort of a mainstream kind of, on a mainstream level, you will get like Anglicans, you know, white Christians talking to Asian Muslims. So you have the Christian Muslim Forum. They sit down and they talk about faith issues, how they can work together, use terms like dialogue and discussion and, you know, affirmative language. The times when black Christians and black Muslims get together is to have them type of debates where who's got the better faith, you know, them confrontational things. And then usually, and then usually what happens is some traditional person of African faith comes in and so you have the three of them. So the Muslim will talk to the Christian and say, you know, you misinterpreted scripture, and then the African person of traditional African faith will come and say, both of you come and brainwash the African people and impose some, you know, false faith upon us. And that kind of stuff is not helpful. It's not really helpful. Because if we're looking to sort of model something that can really make a difference within our communities, and we're doing stuff and we've got individuals within those communities who are making a difference, we owe it to the community to come together and to share that resource and to work together to try and make a real difference. And that, to be honest, isn't happening. If it is happening, more of it needs to happen. So one of the things I've said in the book is that it would be fantastic if there was a real forum where black Christians and black Muslims got together and sort of said, look, you know, community's suffering, what can we do together to try and make a real difference, something that's concerted, something that is, I won't even say strategic because that just starts, you know, sometimes that's kind of woolly, but something that's tangible, something that really does impact the community. And people say, well, these guys may talk the talk, but, you know, we can see some real sort of initiatives that are making a difference, and I think that's important. That's what we need.
Okay, so you'll see there's a role for religion in the society.
Of course. That's what the Pope said, didn't he?
Are you particular that there are things that, if you like, church groups, Muslim groups can do that other people can't do, or the state can't do? Are there particular things you think that...
Yeah. I mean, you know, within your tradition, you think of charity, you know, and how it's, you know, it's a key part of it, isn't it? You know, you have to do it. And you think of, you know, charity stroke voluntary work. You know, you're not even doing it because you think, oh well, that needs to be done. But it's compulsion. You're encouraged to do it. You have to do it. And with Christians as well, they do it also. So, you know, whether that's looking at helping people who are, you know, homeless or dispossessed, marginalised, getting involved in stuff to do with education, you know, I suppose the bigger term is social action. Sometimes faith can inspire people to do that. You know, it's you know, people say, why are you doing it? So, well, my faith is telling me to do it. You know, that's what's underpinning it. You know, so I'm not doing it for material gain. You know, I'm doing it because, you know, my faith says this is what I should do. If I'm a good Muslim or I'm a good Christian, this is how I how I sort of you know, show the world. You know, these are the outpourings or the outworkings of my faith. You know, faith and actions. You know, sometimes you know, you think of your politicians, and when they talk about this kind of thing, it's never altruistic. They have motives. You know, they're doing it sometimes, obviously, through expediency or cynicism. You know, they do it to get votes. So they particularly do it around election time, start talking about, oh, we're going to do this and do that. After the election, they don't do nothing. It'll be interesting to hear what Mr. Cameron says about his big society in a couple of years' time, if that really does take off, or if it just disappears in the same way that, you know, Tony Blair used to go on about the third way and his ethical foreign policy. And, you know, a couple of, was it by 1999, he stopped talking about both of them. So that would be interesting. But in terms of people of faith have a key role to play key role to play in society. If you look at Britain and you look at social movements within this country, they've always been inspired by people of faith. So yeah, faith has a key role to play in this.
Okay. So your book's two big themes: slavery, Muslims in Britain. There must have had an impact on you personally in terms of you've had to look at slavery and probably had to face the fact whether slavery was all bad or there's a role for slavery. So that your views on that. You mentioned people in your family becoming Muslim and so on. You always have a reason why, let's say, you haven't or I have. So how has this impacted you on those particular issues?
I mean, with regard to this book, what appalled me was
the slavery.
The slavery book, the abolition book, was finding out the role of the church in this. Because as a young man growing up, I was told that people like the church has ended slavery. Every abolitionist was a church person, whether you're talking about Wilberforce or Clarkson or Equiano, the Clapham sect. What they never told you was basically that scriptures were used, twisted, manipulated to justify the enslavement of Africans, even when they were trying to teach Africans Christianity. They taught them a warped form of Christianity that sort of said, slaves obey your masters. That type of thing. Even when they were teaching them the Bible, getting them to read the Bible, they didn't even want Africans to read the Bible, because if they read the Bible, they would read portions of it, like in Exodus, which talked about God freeing the Hebrews from slavery. So they sort of told them, don't read that bit, cut huge portions out of the Bible, told them not to read that. So that shocked me, because it shocked me because we were never told this. Totally shocked me. And when you read it, you think to yourself, well, boy, basically the church needs to say sorry. It needs to say sorry, and they deliberately sought to brainwash black people. Although when you do read the whole story, and what I put in here is how people use the slave master's tools, so to speak, to burn down the slave master's house. So Africans did use scripture to foment or to encourage them to break out of their enslavement. With regard to this book, the book on Islam, I suppose what it did to me was to challenge me why I believe what I believe. Because a lot of the time you read certain things in the Bible, you say, yeah, I believe that. Why do you believe it? So for instance, I know that a lot of the Muslim brothers who I interviewed for the book said to me, Richard, the problem I had with Christianity was this whole thing about the Trinity. How could God be one and then be three in one? And what's all that about? And then you ask Christians, tell me about the Trinity, especially Pentecostals, they don't study theology. They can't tell you that. They can't explain it. They say three in one, one in three, you think, but hold on a minute. So what it taught me was, well, hold on, I need to study carefully what I believe. I was hanging around with Muslim brothers, pray 5 people, be interviewing them, say, hold on, brother, I gotta go off and pray now. And he said, well, hold on. I come from a background where people didn't bother pray, all get up in the morning and say, thank you, Lord. And that's their prayer for the day. So it makes you think, well, hold on, why do I believe what I believe? How seriously do I take my faith? And it's interesting that, you've got some African Pentecostal churches who, I would say they target Muslim brothers, but they like it when if a Muslim comes to faith in Christ, because they say that guy will win converts. That's the Christian term, converts. Because they say they have a zeal that most Christians don't have. Christians say average Christian, if not, the average, not Christian, the average pastor or clergyman prays for 5 minutes every day. That's the man who's leading the church. 5 minutes, that's all. Get up in the morning, read his Bible and pray quickly and go off. So, people who pray 5 times a day, for them that's something, that's a commitment. That's a life-changing experience. That's somebody who really lives out his faith. So for me, it said to me, but why do you believe what you believe? Study a scripture carefully. What does it say about Jesus? Is he really the Son of God? What about the Holy Spirit? What about that? This whole third person of the Trinity. What is that? So that's what he taught me. He taught me, you just study more. You need to study your scriptures more. You can't just say you believe because you believe. You need to study more. So that whole thing about theology, tradition, culture, context, that to me was important. So that's what it made me do. But the interesting thing is this: I always get asked two questions when I talk about this book. A, why did you as a Christian write this book about Muslims? And B, how is it that you could actually study the Quran and not become a Muslim? Always get asked that question. I'm surprised nobody asked me that. You're probably going to ask me that later, isn't it?
No, we're definitely going to not ask that one.
But I always get asked those two questions. Always get asked those two questions. And the good question, the valid question. They really are valid questions.
What's the answer?
Huh?
What's the answer?
What's the answer? To which one?
Well, you just answered.
I think I answered the first question. The first question was because there was, I mean, I would have loved Muslim. I think Muslim brothers now. I met some Muslim brothers in Brixton who said they're going to be writing something because they read this and they said, "Boy, we can't have this man writing about our faith. Who is he? We don't trust him." No, they didn't say that, but they just said it just told them that they need to write their own history. It sort of, I wouldn't say inspired them, but it sort of gave them a hurry up. It told them, this is something we need to do. They'd been thinking about doing it, and they're definitely going to do that. And I totally welcome it. I think it's overdue, long overdue, and it's necessary, and it will complement this, if not critique it. In terms of the second question, why? I suppose, I mean, I've been a Christian ever since I was 17, and it's like a journey, just as with your experience, it's a journey, the faith journey. How do you come to faith? What sustains you in your faith? Why do you believe what you believe? I know why I believe what I believe. That doesn't mean I'm totally comfortable with what I believe. I'm challenged by it. I believe in a merciful God, but at the same time I see people, I see bad things happening to good people. I see bad things happening around the world, and then you start thinking, well, what kind of God is this? We pray to a Savior, Lord Jesus, and you see people doing all kinds of things in Jesus' name. The same Jesus I talk about and worship as the Son of God is the same Jesus that George Bush follows, and inspired George Bush to his madness in Iraq and craziness in Afghanistan. And you start saying, well, hold on a minute, I'm part of that. But it's I say I am who I am because of what I believe. And what I believe is Christianity. But that, I must say I have a tremendous respect for Islam. Just as I sort of follow the other Abrahamic faith, Judaism, I sort of have tremendous respect for that as well. And that was the premise for writing the book, writing it out of respect. I hope I've answered your question, buddy.
No, you haven't actually.
I haven't. Okay, well,
Okay.
you're going to come with a supplementary, I can tell.
But you've been good. Thank you for what you've said so far. I mean, anything that anybody wanted to ask specifically, Richard, that I've not asked him?
Yeah. You used to be a Muslim before you started?
No, I didn't. No, I come from my parents. Well, my mum was a Baptist. My dad, I suppose he goes to church now, but he never used to. But no, like I said, I wasn't. It's just, I suppose for me, it's just. It's seeing relatives, cousins and friends revert to Islam that sort of said to me, well, what's going on? And then I mentioned Muhammad. You missed a bit right at the start, brother, where I was talking about what motivated me to write it. It's seeing relatives convert or revert rather, seeing a whole movement of people move away from the church, and whether you're talking about Pentecostalism or you're talking about Methodism or Anglicans or a whole lot of Catholics actually, and you can see why when you hear the Pope speak. A whole lot of people from Catholic traditions, become Muslims, and you kind of think, well, what's going on? What motivated them to do that? So the book is sort of has interviews with them, asking them, why did they move away? And there's no one reason, one specific reason, just a number. But what they've all said is that it completely changed them, totally transformed their worldview, their mindset. Obviously, sometimes it created tensions within their family structure. So you have situations where, not everybody's in your situation, brother. We have situations where, you know, a couple of the individuals I interviewed, you know, they're sort of estranged is too strong a term, but you know, with one, his dad's a pastor, and his dad sort of said, no, you know, son, you know, I love you as my son, but at the same point, you know, I can't agree with what you're doing, and that relationship has almost broken down. You know, it's broken down. You know, you know, there's no relationship there between father and son, and the father thinks it's his fault because if he'd have done his job properly, his son would never have become a Muslim. So, you know, it's it was that. He was documenting those types of stories. You know, other stories of one particular brother in the book was a bit wayward. He got sent down while he was in prison. It was his partner and the church were praying for the guy, praying that he would find deliverance. He did. He found it in Islam. When he came out now, created tensions between him and his partner. You know,
especially those prayers.
Huh? He created tensions and it's that, you know, talking about these kinds of stuff. Because where would you hear about that? But these are real stories. You know, these are real experiences. You know.
I have one question, Richard. Before I ask it, I'd just like to take this opportunity in thanking you for sharing your views on both of your books and your experiences as to why you wrote them. But the question really is, what next? You know.
Well, for me, I tell you what I would really love to do with this book, because I mean, not so much this one. This is about history. This is, I wouldn't say history. I wouldn't say it's dead, but it's, you know, it's something in the past. This is what they call present continuous. And
so the abolition book you're saying is history.
Yeah.
You're saying the black Muslims in Britain book is.
This is present continuous. I mean, what I would love to do with this is to kind of, I don't know, set up some type of forum, you know, where we could engage in some proper conversations about, you know, maybe not about theology, because we're not going to agree on that. Do you know what I mean? There won't be any sort of, we can agree maybe to disagree or have, you know, sit down and study more, but maybe to sort of put forward initiatives or joint initiatives on what we could, especially from within a black context, do to help the black community. You know, pool our resources, our enthusiasm, our ideas to, you know, to help, you know, reverse, you know, underachievement with regard to education, to look at issues of mental health and health per se, to look at issues, you know, social action initiatives that can really make a difference within the black community. So that's what I would want this book to be, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm having conversations about that. And you know, where I go, I sort of try and talk about it. So even when I was in Brixton a couple of weeks ago, you know, I met some guys down there, and we're going to meet again and sit down and talk about that. I think some people are open to that, but it's you know, it's about trust, it's about confidence, it's about relationships, and they take time. But it's not just a one-off business where you write a book and say, well, I've done that and tick that box. I don't think it's not like that, because I think, you know, the whole phenomenon, I think that's the right term to use, of black people in particular embracing Islam is on the rise. It's not going anywhere. It's you know, it is on the increase. Something that we need to share, and we need to talk about and say, you know, how can we as let's say black communities work together. So to me, it's not just a book, it's more something that I would like to sort of use to turn into some kind of forum or group which we could sort of sit down and engage in some kind of conversation with regard to assisting the black community.
One question. It seems like from what you're discussing, talking about the Muslims, it seems like people you've been speaking to Is that really the Brixton community?
No, sir. No, I mean, I went to, I think I mentioned it here, I interviewed people in Birmingham, Walsall, obviously I'm from Bradford, Leeds, Reddie, I think it's all in here, maybe about 10 towns and cities. I mean, like I said, when I initially met the individuals, when I was on my book tour, so I'd meet people and get talking to them and I'd say, look, I'm going to come back and talk to you. I mean, I came up here to see you, didn't I? Exactly.
So is he in the book?
Yes.
He's in the book?
Yes. You didn't get ready, have you?
You don't put me on the spot.
He's in the book.
He's in the book?
Yes.
All right.
He's in the book.
We interviewed this man, it was very good. You had quite a detailed conversation.
Yeah, I mentioned it here. Look, I say I got in a taxi and I asked for a mosque, and the taxi man just drove me straight there. So I mentioned that. So it's in here. Yeah, it's in here. I probably won't be able to find it right now. But no, it is in here.
That's just like trying to find the Trinity in the Bible.
Listen, I bet you'll find it. We'll keep talking.
Okay.
But
was there any questions? I'm not going to keep Richard too long. He's going back to London. Was there any other question?
I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot,
but you will do.
but no, I'm not. I try not to. But I think, I mean, I don't know if I've got the authority to do this, but I think you've said a couple of things that I've picked up on.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you said that you were comfortable in your faith.
Yeah.
And my feeling is basically that from my journey,
Yeah.
and the journeys that a lot of the people that I've spoken to and I know, is that it's about how easy it's about tasting.
Yeah.
And you can examine something from the outside.
Yeah.
So you can literally stand out this window, look in here, and see what we're eating,
Yeah.
and what we're oh, this is nice. They have this, have that.
Yeah.
Unless you actually, as Martin says,
Yeah.
you can't call yourself a diner
Yeah.
unless you're dining with the people,
Yeah.
and that way, that's when you taste.
Yeah.
So I mean, when you said what's the next step? My thing is next is that you need to sit with the people, and not just like I think you have to spend some time, a week, 2 weeks, living with the people, because that's the only way you actually really, really know. Because when we see the thing about it for us is that when you ask somebody, can I marry your daughter, or can I marry this girl? The person says, well, if I'm responsible for this person, and someone brings you along, they ask the question, how do you know this person? Have you lived with him? Have you spent time with him? Have you worked with him? And these kind of things. So I think talking is good to build up sort of like a dialogue. But the next step forward to really know someone or know how they live, and you have to spend some time. So to me, that's the next step.
No. It's a valid point. It's a valid point, and it's. I think I use the term relationship.
Yes.
But again, it's about trust, isn't it?
Yes.
And confidence. And I think I mentioned in here when I was first doing the interviews, some people were sort of very, and rightly so, wary of my motives. What's this man's agenda? And the interesting thing is, I think it was in Reddie, arranged to meet somebody to do an interview. The person said, no, I don't trust you. And they said no, and I said, well, okay, fair enough. You should have told me that before I got on the train. But you can understand that. But you're right. It is that. So put it this way: if there is going to be any type of forum, and hopefully there will be, it has to sort of start with not just talking, but you sit down and you eat together.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Break, that kind of stuff. Yes, of course,
exactly.
It has to be that. It can't be just we're going to sit down and meet for an hour, have an agenda, and then sit down and then say the first motion on the agenda is this, and then afterwards you shake hands and you leave. No, it has to be part of something where you sit down and you socialise, you talk. You don't just talk faith, but you talk a whole range of different things. Because that's how relationships are. Whether you're talking about marriage, or you talk about friendship or whatever, it has to be part of that. No, I
just
agree.
life in general.
Well, exactly.
Absolutely.
No, I'm not contradicting you.
Cool.
No, I'm not. But it's a good question.
I think what we'll do, we'll kind of let Richard kind of take a breather, but obviously free to come up and question him, pick his brain further, get his autograph, buy the book. So yeah, again, thanks again, Richard, for coming. Yeah.